Hello, guys. It's Ronnie Doss. Welcome back to the Like a Doss podcast. Great to be here with you. I've got my main man, Mr. Joel Bennett, alongside me today. We've got some great stuff, I'm sure, to talk to you about. Joel, how are you, man?
I'm doing very well, Ronnie. It's good to be with you again. It's been a while. We need to get together more often, for sure.
I know, man. You've been traveling the world, as always, as I have, but nice to be back home for a couple of weeks. And so, what about you? You heading out anytime soon?
Of course, tomorrow, yeah, heading out on another 4-day trip. But I was around enough to catch your message this weekend at Oasis
Oh,
in
nice,
Nashville,
man.
and I would love to speak on that message with you. It was an incredible message. What's been your feedback on it so far?
Oh, wow, man. Well, that's great. I'm glad you got to see it. We had some incredible feedback, man. Really some great messages, emailed, direct messages to me, just talking about where people were and what parts of it really resonated with them. And I think it's probably some of the strongest feedback, I'd say, just as far as the quantity of messages that I've ever received. I'd say it's probably one of the strongest. So I think it resonated. I'm glad you got to see it, though.
It was fantastic. It really was. And what I like about your speaking and those, obviously, if you're listening to podcasts, you've heard Ronnie at some point, but is that there's no mincing of words. It's not a long drawn out. I'm going to take you from this place to this place. You just lay out a fact, let them chew on it. Lay out a fact, let them chew on it. And a lot of this stuff is stuff that we haven't tasted before or we have ignored. And I think that's part of some of your message there was saying, hey, face some stuff. If you keep burying stuff, you're not going to change. You're not going to be able to reinvent yourself. Face some stuff. And that spoke volumes to me. That was incredible.
Well, good, man. I think that's what a lot of people said. And I think it's easy to just get in that routine, right? So you've just done things for so long, and it's easier just to keep doing it. And, that's where I see Joel in the trainings that I do when people share is they just kind of get caught in these ruts. And it's not that any of us are really bad people. It's just that we're habitual creatures. We get into habit, and sometimes it's hard to break. And sometimes in a team, it's easy to just kind of keep doing things the way that we've been doing it and maybe just kind of skirting around some issues, I guess, in family, skirting around an issue, even in our own physical health, even with our finances at times. I mean, look, man, and just being completely transparent, there's just so many things that you learn along the way if you're paying attention. But having this new information or learning something is really not enough. I think we've got to really take some action on it. We've got to implement any type of wisdom that we get. I made this quote. I shared this quote. I think I might have shared it this past weekend. But I said that action without information is dangerous, but information without action is useless. And you got lots of people with lots of great information, but not really doing anything with it. And so that's kind of what my message is. I like to kind of target that and just kind of mess with people's heads a bit and get them thinking again. Where can I start to create some change? So
That you
you know,
did say that this weekend, and that was one of the things that people had to go, wait, 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 I'm writing this down, slow down, and let me chew on this, because that's one that you can chew on a long time. I think we talk about, when we talk about change, we talk about, and you mentioned this, talk about reinvention. Uh, do you find sometimes that we just become what we see, what we surround ourselves with, and sometimes even our parental influences? That's the way I was raised. That's the way we've always done it. That's that can be the ruts that you're talking about.
yeah, absolutely. I think that so many things have been passed on to you and I and everybody for the most part on this planet through parental influences. And at the time, it's what I mentioned this past weekend. Just because your grandparents and great grandparents did it, and you are hearing now that you probably should change some of the thinking that they had, it doesn't mean that they were wrong, and it didn't mean that there weren't some benefits to thinking the way that they thought then. So it didn't mean they were wrong. It just means that maybe that's not right for right now. And, as fast as the world is changing, as quickly as the world is changing, I think one of the most important things that we've got to be able to do is to make adjustments along the way, shifts in our direction, or just even adjustments to our trajectory, the way that we're, what direction we're headed in. And a lot of times, because we've done things for so long, or we learned this from somebody that we loved and that we cared about, I think a lot of times if we think we change that, then all of a sudden we're making those people wrong, or that there's something about them. They were so sincere to think that this is the way it is. And you hear family, I don't know, it's almost like catchphrases passed down, through the ages of, well, money doesn't grow on trees, right? Or if you got to do something, you want it done right, do it yourself. And you hear those things, you're like, yeah, there's truth to that, but there's also different ways of looking at those things. And so taking something as an absolute truth and saying that this is the way it is, I don't know that that's the case. And I think sometimes in reinventing ourselves, all we're doing, Joel, is to really look at where we are currently in the moment, what we see around us, and being willing to make adjustments. It's almost operating with a sense of humility in saying that I don't have all the right answers. And honestly, I don't need to have all the right answers. I'm not trying to have all the right answers. I'm just trying to do what's best right now, in this moment, with what we see. And so who you hang around, their mindsets, they're going to rub off on you. The energy that people have around you, it's going to rub off on you. And if you're not careful, you wind up being a lot like the people you associate with, even very unconsciously. You start to talk about the same things, focus on the same things, and then wind up really achieving the same things. So a lot of the same things. And it's not saying that's bad. It's just be very aware that you become a lot like, your surroundings.
Let's delve into that. We've used the word reinvention a few times. Let's delve into what that means and what areas we can reinvent ourselves to make progress in life. Where are there parameters of that? Are there things we shouldn't reinvent, or is everything wide open?
Look, man, I think everything's got to be wide open. When somebody says, well, I can't put my faith on the table, I always have to keep my faith the way that it is. Well, if your faith isn't changing and it's not growing and getting better, then what's the point? You can't think the same way as an adult as you did when you were a child. Jim Rohn used to make the joke that the reason they made those desks in school when you're in the first grade, the size that they are, is they don't want you staying in them very long. They want you to outgrow them. You can't put a grown man in one of those desks. And so it's like, what's the point? And so with our faith, if we're exercising it, applying it to our life, then we see how our faith really works in present time. I'm not into the religious dogma of it. I just like being a faith person led by the Spirit, being a Christian more like Christ. I mean, I want to be led and have the courage to take steps and do new things and see how my faith works in those areas. If I'm not putting myself somewhere like that out there, I can't say that I really believe much of anything anyway. I mean, if you can't apply it, what use is it to have it? You're just like, would you carry a gun around all the time on your hip if you never had any bullets? I mean, what would be the point? You'd finally get tired of it. What would be the point of, you know what I mean? It's like, why would you carry a backpack on your back if you didn't have anything in it, if you didn't need it? It's just something there. And so I think it's really important for us to really assess everything in our life that we're giving space to and really ask ourselves, does this serve us in moving forward? And so that's a great question. You can just call it being in the question. Is the way I'm looking at this, the way I communicate this, the way I show up each day, my attitudes and my mindsets, is it serving me in going where I want to go? And the problem with that oftentimes, Joel, is that people just don't know where they want to go. They just don't know where they want to go. And you don't have any direction. Then if it's like you don't have any direction, then, well, that's fine. You're always going to be spinning your wheels and you're always going to be lost. You're always going to be frustrated because you don't know if you're making progress. And so if you're really about progress and you're setting some goals, then, that's really where you're growing. Ralph Waldo Emerson, I'm pretty sure it was Emerson. Emerson said it's not in his goals, but in his transitions that a man is great. And, so you're great during transition. And, life's one big transition. So things have to change. They do. And if you're not willing to change in the world that we're in with technology changing things so quickly and the mindsets and even how kids are raised and what they see and what they're exposed to, if it all can't be put on the table on some level, you're going to get left behind. And so I think it's a very important thing to assess every area, Joel. I really do.
I don't watch a lot of TV. You may not know that. I don't watch a lot of TV because I work in TV and it's like enough. But I do have kind of a little, what do you call those, things you like to binge on? It's any kind of survival type show. Mm-hmm. When you throw people who look like they don't have the equipment, they don't have the mindset, whatever,
sure,
throw them out and watch them survive. Mm-hmm. There's a one on now called The Wheel, and they take 6 different ecosystems in Patagonia, and the people stay in one of them, in each one, an individual one. And then after 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, they rotate them. So they're going from the mountains to the desert to the wetlands, And you watch how they have to develop, they have to adapt. If they don't, they're going to die.
Hmm.
And I think so many times we're faced with these changes, things that happen in our lives. This changes my boss just decided to move on. Wait, what does that do for me? What do I do now? And you have to adapt and change and reinvent yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, in any environment, I think what most people do is they're trying to create an environment that causes them to be so comfortable
Right.
that they're not anymore utilizing all this information and all this accessibility that's actually within their own brain. There's a book that I'm reading about that, and it's really about putting yourself into situations that cause that there's actually a demand on your brain to adapt and to really enhance itself and start to use parts of it that it might not be using when you're in such a climate controlled world. You could think about living in New York City now, during the winter when it's cold. Even in New York City, people that that typically can jump in a cab or get Uber if it's really cold or whatever. A lot of times they don't have to deal with the elements for more than a few minutes out of the day. In Boston or a city like that where you actually drive pretty much everywhere. I mean, think about it. Somebody can get out into their garage, get in their car, drive out through the elements, get out of their car, run right into their office where it's climate controlled. At the end of the day, do the same thing. They're not out in the cold for more than maybe a minute in the day in these really cold conditions. And we've become such a comfortable species in most areas that there's this big part of our brain, I think, that's just starting to shut off because we strived for comfort for so long. And then 100 years ago, when we had indoor plumbing, indoor heating, we had electricity, and all these things go into the home. Now, Joel, we're so comfortable that there's a big part of our brain that I think that's almost it's falling apart. And I think that we've become almost I don't know, it's almost like zombie-like. We're just walking around, kind of being led by the carrot. Go do this, go do that, and we've become almost robotic, and we're not accessing these deeper parts of our brains by putting a demand on ourselves. And I think I think that leads to, just think about it. When somebody gets older, if they're doing something where their mind has to stay sharp, then it's amazing how oftentimes somebody gets older, how sharp their mind can be at 80, 90 years old, 100 years old. You've seen people because they've had to use their brain in scenarios of teaching and learning, and it's just amazing, man. And so, I think this adapting and being willing to make these changes is so important.
You need to make these changes on a yearly basis, a daily basis, moment by moment. How often do I need to assess myself and say, I need to do a little reinvention here?
I don't know moment to moment. I think you could be more caught up in the need to reinvent than it could become more about proving yourself than expressing yourself. If you were always worried about reinventing for something else, I think that there is a point where you meet what we'd say maybe the plateau. You get into a nice ebb and flow, and you're like, this is working for a while. But I think you've got to notice the trends. If you see things in your life that are starting to look like they might not work, and you think, well, if it's not working now, 6 months from now, it's probably not going to work for sure. A year from now, you got to kind of make those adjustments before, right, the dip or the curve actually happens. And so I think that's being a little ahead of the game. But as far as, I don't know, reinventing, but as far as self-awareness, I think the practice of self-awareness makes us much better when it becomes a moment-to-moment thing. I think in the beginning, I think about, being in the question like it used to go, an hour or two would go by, and I think, okay, where am I at mentally? Now it's more like every minute or two I'm checking, all right, where am I at mentally? Am I thinking about forward progress? Am I thinking about the goals that we have down? Am I thinking about the time management and what I've laid out to get accomplished? Or is my mind just running off in 1,000 different directions? I think the better you get at it and the more almost unconscious it becomes, you stay more focused because you've practiced it. And as you practice being focused, practice being self-aware, and you try that as a moment-to-moment basis, you just get better at it. When people say, well, I just can't focus, I just can't whatever, it's because they haven't been really intentional about training their brain. Joel, you can train your brain to do anything. It's incredible how amazing of an operating system your brain is. And if you use it, it gets stronger. If you forget and you don't use it, it's just like a muscle. It gets weaker. If you want to train your brain to focus, start finding some things to focus on, utilizing your brain as much as possible, and you see just how strong and how sharp it can get.
That's all great stuff, man. We got to chew on that. Let's talk about reinvention then in relationships. Uh, as you know, my wife Sandy and I have been married 25 years, and it's not the same relationship it was 25 years ago.
Mhm.
First of all, our hairstyles are different. She had big hair back then, and I had a mullet. So, beyond those things, we have reinvented ourselves. And we, of course, bringing children up through that, you have to reinvent yourself with that because your partner is now not just your partner alone, they're also a mother to these boys, and you have to be aware of that. And so, uh, how often should we reinvent maybe our relationships and try to continue to make those fresh so they survive?
Well, I think they need to stay along the way fresh in that you've got to be intentional about date nights, relationship, investment into the marriage. And a lot of times, and you guys have raised such great kids, the challenge, I'd say young men, but the challenge with that is sometimes I see parents that have made it so much about the kids that they've lost themselves. And I think that's the thing yes, it's honorable and it's noble to sacrifice yourself for someone else. But what's the point of doing that if we continue to pass that on? And everybody does that they make it about their kids, and not about themselves. Then have really any of us really lived? I think one of the best examples that I can set for my daughters is to be going after goals and trying things and being excited when there's a win, and all that, so that the family's really excited about certain things happening. And that makes the conversations between Jen and I better, more rich when she's doing things and she's setting goals and she's achieving them. And as you know, just with what she does at the gym, with starting to instruct and train, those are goals for her. And when she accomplishes them, she feels good and she's doing great. For me, it's the same. And so I think it needs to be a balance. And I even said that this past weekend that balance is not found. It's created. And so if you want to find balance in relationship, you've got to do the continual, intentional investment into the relationship. It's the old saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. You don't eat 30 apples at the end of the month thinking that it's going to keep the doctor away. It's one a day. And it's the same way with exercise. It's the same way with investing in your marriage, same way, whatever. You don't get to one day out of the month at the end of the month, oh, today's the day to teach my kids something really important. You don't do that. It's got to be consistent. I think that balance and consistency are such an important part of being and really creating something valuable. And a lot of times, people just don't do it. Their focus is on the kids. Their focus is on job. And I just think that it's important for us to stay focused. I believe right now we could be making more money than we already are. And we're doing great. But I think we could be doing more. We could be making more money. But at this point, I'm going, gosh, Addie and Kennedy, they're 7 and Kennedy's almost 3. I know the years are going to go by quickly, and I like spending a few hours during the day with them. I know I'm never going to get these times back. They're rich times, and my dad tells me, Ronnie, this is the best times of your life. And so, being able to spend with your kids like that, and I know how quick it goes by. So, I think a daily investment into where you want to go, awareness daily, that way you don't have to all of a sudden slam into something and go, oh my God, I need to reinvent myself. I think doing that more continual on a annual basis, every 6 months, just checking, hey, am I up to date? Am I learning new things? Is my conversation evolving? Is my consciousness evolving? Is my wardrobe, is my fashion changing? Am I getting any better? And not that that's the main focus. It doesn't mean you're a bad person if you're not doing those things. It just means that if you stayed on top of these, it might create some better scenarios for you. So there you go.
Good stuff. We've talked about the being in a rut and not changing, not reinventing ourselves. I think one thing we really need to do is to make peace with our past, whether that's an event, whether that's a mindset, whether it's a practice that we've had in the past, something that keeps us tied to the past, so where we can't move on in the future. How would I go about making peace with that so that I can, obviously be a better person and be a better father, be a better husband, be a better employee, or be a better entrepreneur?
Good. Well, a couple of things, and I'll tell you about some companies that had to do that. But you got to rid yourself of the residue. That's what I say a lot. Rid yourself of the residue. That's your past. Any story that you've created, anything that's going on in your past, chances are you don't recollect the actual event. You recollect your last recollection of the event. So it can change over time. when old war stories, there's 600 men out there, and then it goes to 900. Next thing you know, there's 3,000 men. It changes, the stories change, whatever. It's all a story. Once it's gone, once the event is over, it's all a perception. It's all about perspective. It's all about how you choose to look at it. And making peace with your past simply means that I come to a place where I know I'm at choice, and I can say, this is what I'm going to make this mean. Now, your emotions may start running wild going, but that's not the way what I made it mean in the very beginning. In the beginning, you make things mean something so that you'll have a sense of control. You get a dopamine drip of reward every time you create certainty. You go, well, that went on and that person hurt me and that meant they were evil. And once you label them, you get a dopamine drip knowing that now you've labeled them, you've put them in some kind of a box. It tells your unconscious mind that means you're in some way in control and there's payoff for it, even though the label you've put on someone or the box that you put them in and that story makes you miserable. So you're happy in your misery, okay, because you're in control or you've made it mean that. So, Joel, to make peace with your past, you look at any event, ask yourself, what's the story you created as a result, and does that story serve you? Yes or no? If the answer is no, then you're a fool if you don't change it. That's all I would tell anybody. If you look at your past, well, you don't know what went on with as a kid, that my dad or my cousin or my mom or whoever didn't treat me right or they didn't say or I saw this and here's a big one. I witnessed this when I was young. It's like the two young men that grow up with an alcoholic father. One of them grows up to be an alcoholic. He loses his job. He loses money all the time. He blows through relationships. He can't keep it right. They ask him, what happened? He said, well, I watched my dad. The next guy, who's his brother, grows up, great marriage, successful business guy, healthy, good relationships, contributing to the community. So what happened with you? Tell us your story. Well, I watched my dad. Both watching the same thing, right? Just chose to make it mean something different for them. So it's the same way with your past. You got to make peace with it. But if you're going to make peace with it, you got to create a story that serves you in moving forward. And if you won't address it, and I heard this recently, if you fight your fears, you'll be fighting your whole life. If you face your fears, you'll be free forever. And so if you have something from your past that still instills some fear in you, instead of fighting that fear going, I'm not going to be afraid, no, face it and change your perspective on it. And then there you start to make, I guess, peace, and some of that negative energy and association with it can start to dissipate. Meanings and labels are so powerful, Joel, and people just don't get that. They think that because they saw something and they felt something, that's reality, and it's just not true. Your emotions are liars. They are. You can step out of the emotion, get your head clear, and step back in, and the more you practice that, now you're not a victim to your perspectives. And for me, that's making peace, with the past. But you could take that concept, I'm going to transition this. You could take that concept into how a company works or a family works. A family could be closer because they went through a crisis. Pat Riley talked about the LA Lakers. He said, when we went through a crisis, we developed what's called a covenant. And when they went through and developed a covenant, he goes, that's when they got stronger as a team. He said, but sometimes you go through a crisis and it pulls you together. Other people go through a crisis and it pushes them apart, all because of choice, all because of what they make it mean. And, companies are the same. Like Marvel Comics. I watched a movie the other night. What was one of the Iron Man movies? Marvel Comics. Comic book market crashed earlier mid-90s, right? And so what did Marvel do? Instead of just folding up and quitting, what they do? They shifted into movies. And now you got the movies like what Spider-Man and the Avengers, right?
100 movies.
Iron Man. These are billion-dollar franchises. And they came out of something that was already there, right? They just adjusted. They kind of reinvented, right? And so stuff like that. I mean, Netflix, same way. Oh, how about this one? Old Spice. You remember them? We were just talking about them. I mentioned something about Old Spice. You just see the commercials now. They went from just an old grandpa's cologne to now they're a top seller in the category that they're in. The deodorant that they have, Old Spice, I think it's one of the number one sellers, through a reinvention. And it didn't mean that they were bad the way they used to be. Converse, the same thing. Used to be in what, the 70s, Converse tennis shoes were the NBA. Well, you're a sports guy, but they were
Yeah,
the athletic shoe.
of
Well,
course.
and what they do, they did this thing called a connectivity uh, convert. I don't know, a connection or something like that. I forget exactly what connectivity campaign, and that's what it was. And they went from being a basketball shoe to they put their shoes on guys like I think Kurt Cobain, other like
Yeah,
musicians, and then guess what? They kind of rebranded themselves. Now they're over $1 billion a year company, and so they took what they had, they just kind of reinvented it, and so and hey, Super Bowl Patriots. Come on, the guy that I think Kraft, whatever his first name,
Robert
Robert
Kraft. Yeah,
Kraft, right? He bought the Patriots in the early '90s when
yeah.
they were in bankruptcy. He bought them, did an upgrade on the stadium. I think he paid $175 million for the team, and now the team's one of the most valuable in the league. What, 2.6 billion dollars.
Right.
So what do? You take things that maybe weren't working well, and you go, hey, what can we do with this? And there's some things you got to completely get rid of. If they ain't working, you just cut it off. It's time to move on. But when you're talking about team, relationship, your own life, you got to live with these things. Why not be willing to reinvent them, make them better? Anyway, there you go.
Man, this is such good stuff. This stuff is flying. I need my pen and paper to work faster for
I
me
am
here.
frustrated that you. I'm frustrated that you didn't take notes on that. How about this? You're probably holding your laptop, and I'm doing this on my Apple computer at home, my iMac. But think about that one. Steve Jobs was the same thing. He got
Yeah.
fired as basically a CEO, and then came back on in like 90. I think it was 97,
7,
95,
yeah, I believe
97,
97.
and they're bankrupt. And he comes back, almost bankrupt, comes back, and now Apple is the most valuable company on the planet. And when he came back, what was his theme for Apple? Think different. And it was just take what you got, start thinking different. And you know what? I mean, this stuff, it's real. And anybody that wants to argue it and go, well, that ain't for me. Well, you're stuck. Stay there. Whine, cry, be whatever. Be the victim that your life has been harder than everybody else's. Okay,
Right.
maybe it has been on some level, but I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that had a harder life than you that decided to do something positive with it. And then what they do, they moved on. I just, that's my passion for people, is to go, man, you got so much more in you than what you're operating at. And, I've just seen it enough, fortunate enough. I wasn't born with these guru eyes to be able to see something. I mean, it's not that way. I couldn't read people's energy and aura like it was a color, it's like a rainbow around. I couldn't do that stuff. You know what I did? I got introduced to transformational type of work, personal development, and I saw that how simple shifts in mindset and perspective, sometimes harder than others, but simple shifts could change the way a person operated in their life. And when it happened, and I saw it happen to older people, I saw it happen to younger people, I went, it can happen to anybody that's still alive and has breath in their lungs. They can choose to change their perspective on something, and if it's been holding them back, it can set them free.
And you said, I was waiting for a pause to go, we need to choose to change. And then you said it. Exactly right. Choose to change.
You're always at choice every minute, every second. You could choose, and I tell people, you could choose to change your life in a moment. What could you do? In a moment, you could just be driving down the road and go, you know what? I need to lose some weight. So guess what? I'm going to join the next gym that I see. And you pull in and you walk in and you give them a credit card and go, I'll be back here every whatever. And in that moment, you change your life. And then guess what? Because you just in that moment chose that gym, then you meet some people in that gym that develop new relationships with them in that gym. Now your life, you start hanging out with them. Your life is completely different out of one single choice that came to you in a moment. And your day is filled with these moments. But people just, because they're so used to how the moments used to look, they expect the moments to look that way going forward. And it's a huge ego trip of control and self-rightness that my life is probably going to look this way. Your life will look the way that you choose for it to look. Now, yes, there are things that will happen that stink. We know that. None of us, it rains, what do they say? It rains on the just and the unjust. I don't even know what that just term actually means, but the good and the bad or the whatever. We're all screwed up on some level, and it rains on all of us. But we all have the opportunity to make a shift at any time. And so I just, habits are hard to break sometimes, but I'm telling you, the only way to do it is use the chisel of choice and chip away at it. So there you go.
Use the word trajectory. You're a NASA guy. They talk trajectory. You can change your trajectory.
in a moment. And over time, that singular moment, think about it, a rocket traveling at 20,000 miles an hour, if you change it by 1/10 of a degree and let it travel at 20,000 miles an hour over, let's say, a 3 month or a 6 month period, think about the vast difference in space where it would be over that time. And that's how it is in life. In the beginning, you make the choice. In the end, the choice makes you. And so why not today just say, hey, today's the day to choose. I need to reinvent my brand, my company, how I do things, reinvent our family, write out some new values, put some new action steps in order to do something with it. Anyway, we're at
Man,
time, pal. We're at time.
we,
We're
we
30
are
minutes.
so good today. I want to keep going, but you're right. We're at time. Give them one more thing that people can chew on as we go.
You're worth every bit of the change. You're worth it. You're worth the work. Gosh, you're worth it. If you're listening to this, you are absolutely worth the work. If you take time washing a car, vacuuming your home, doing your laundry, cutting your grass, if you'll put the time into that, put the time into you, put the time into you. You're worth the work. When you change how you think, you can improve your relationships. You improve your relationships. You start working together better with your team, your family. You produce better results. The world gets better. And because you're producing better results, you'll probably, like most people, make that mean that you should feel good and be excited and be happy, because that's progress. And so I just think that we're worth it. We're all worth it. And we're worth the work. And anybody that ever tells you that you're not, and that you just need to put your head down and work and not think for yourself, and not honor yourself and operate from self-love, honoring yourself, eating right, exercising, thinking right, anybody that tells you shouldn't do that stuff's crazy. They're just not doing it themselves. It's like anybody that ever tells you that money's not cool. It's just typically people that don't have any money. And I don't mean to sound rude or brash about that, but we need to step up our game. And when we get that we're really worth it, we do it not from a selfish aspect, but one of, hey, I'm worth it. And as I lead by that example, other people will see it, my kids will see it, my family will see it, and maybe, hopefully, it will inspire them to want to do better themselves. And here's the deal, Joel, we can all do better. All of us. In every area. That doesn't mean that we should be overwhelmed and shut down, but we can all do better. This month, pick an area that you know you could do better. Put an action plan together and take some steps towards it. And over time, you will see that you can absolutely transform your life, and you're worth it. So that's
Thank
it,
you,
pal.
Ronnie.
Anything
Good
else?
stuff.
Yeah, thank you, bud. Thanks, guys, so much. If you want to email us, do so, info at dossteam.com. We appreciate you. Thanks for subscribing to us, and share this with people that you think should hear it. So appreciate you. God bless you. Take care.